Jack, and you're watching GreenupBeacon.com.
First and Peoples Bank has 6 convenient locations to serve you. From South Shore to the main office, First and Peoples Bank has been serving this area with complete banking services since 1932. Visit the home office near you. First and Peoples Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
We are the home office. Come visit any of our 6 locations.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Russell High School and Middle School Annual Veterans Day program. I am Master Sergeant Wissinger, and along with Colonel Maggard, we will be your MCs for today's program. Today we are commemorating the services of veterans of all wars. We remember how men and women set aside their civilian pursuits to serve their nation's cause, defending the freedom of man and preserving our precious American heritage. We honor and salute all of the many veterans who throughout our history have unselfishly placed their lives on the line for freedom. If everyone would please stand for a prayer by Cadet Sean Maloney and remain standing for the presentation of the colors, the Pledge of Allegiance led by Cadet James Gabler, the playing of our national anthem by the Russell High School Band, and the posting of the colors.
Please bow your head in prayer. Dear Lord, today we honor our veterans, worthy men and women who gave their best when they were called upon to serve and protect their country. We pray that you will bless them, Lord, for their unselfish service and the continual struggle to preserve our freedoms, our safety, and our country's heritage for all of us. Bless them abundantly for the hardships they faced, for the sacrifices they made, and for the many contributions to America's victories over tyranny and oppression. We respect them. We thank them. We honor them. We are proud of them. And we pray that you will watch over these special people and bless them with peace and happiness. In your name we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, I'd like to recognize our distinguished guests. We are pleased to have with us today the City of Flatwoods Mayor Bobby Crager. We also have the previous Russell High School JROTC instructor, Chief Master Sergeant Norwood Merritt. Superintendent of Russell Independent Schools, Mr. Sean Horn. Our school board members, our board chair, Mrs. Judy Ledford. The board vice chair, Mr. Terry Best. Board member, Mr. John Jones. The principal of Russell High School, Mrs. Anna Chapin. And the principal of Russell Middle School, Mr. Sean Moore. And the most distinguished guest and why we are here today are veterans and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking time to be with us today. We will now hear from the Russell High School Choir led by Mrs. Russell.
That has brightened Thank you, Mrs. Russell. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, the Russell High School band, led by Mr. Hunt, will play an Armed Forces salute. During the salute, they will play each of the branch's service song. Veterans, would you please stand when your branch service song is played? Please stand when your song is played.
The United States Army.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. According to the U.S. Census, as of this morning, our country has 320 million people living in the United States of America. Approximately 1.5 billion are serving as soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen on active duty. If you add another 850,000 to the Guard and Reserve, that brings our total to 2.3 million people protecting our freedom, which is only 0.007% of the population. I'd like to give you a visualization of what that is. Everyone sitting in the lower seats over here in the chair back, raise your hand, please. Everybody raise your hand. They represent the total population of 320 million people in the United States. Shelby Huddleston and Kara Marr, could you please step forward? They graciously accepted to help me out in this visualization. I was going to ask Shelby to bend over, but she decided she wants to get on her knees. So Shelby, could you get on your knees? Kara and Shelby represent those people serving on active duty in the Guard and in the Reserve. So you can see what a small percentage are protecting our freedoms in the United States of America today. Thank you, Shelby. Thank you, Kara. The military service affects many of us directly or indirectly. What I'd like to do is have everyone in the bleachers, if you have someone who is a family member who is either serving or has served in the military, please stand up. Okay, what I'd like to do now is ask you to remain standing and ask everybody else who either has a friend or a relative or a church member who has served in the military to please stand up. A couple more. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look around. All of these people are affected by service members protecting our freedom today. Please be seated. Sitting before you, each one of these veterans, when they joined the military, they signed a blank check to the United States of America, payable up to and including their lives. Each one of these veterans sitting in front of you was willing to sacrifice their life for our freedom. So how about giving them a hand? My statisticians are not on time, so I'm going to call off the number of years they served later. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today. How many of the veterans remember what RHIP stands for? You can hear some laughter. RHIP. For those of you in the audience, that means rank has its privilege. As the senior instructor for ROTC here at Russell, it's my privilege to select a guest speaker every year. I had the opportunity to hear our guest speaker today at the Memorial Day service at Flatwood City Park this last May. I was so impressed that the next day I asked him if he would please speak at today's ceremony. I've known him for 10 years. If you asked me to describe our guest speaker in only 3 words, I would say God, country, family. He's a man of deep faith. He's an extremely patriotic man. You're going to hear this today when he speaks. And he's a man of strong family values. Here at Russell, we're blessed to have both him and his wife as part of the Russell family. They're both teachers at the high school. Those of you that have had him in class will know exactly what I'm talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please join me in welcoming today's guest speaker, Mr. John Lynn. Pass it.
Colonel Maggard. Thank you so much, Colonel Maggard. A lot of things in life, when you start out life, you wonder what's going to happen with your job and what kind of benefits you're going to get, and is it going to be fun? Are you going to hate it? You're going to love it? What's going to happen? I have to say I love my job, and as far as something has happened to me, that's one of the most wonderful things anybody's ever said to me. Thank you, Colonel Maggard. I appreciate that. The cadets here is going to help me today, so if you'll bear with it, he and I are going to work together with this. And of course, I do thank Colonel Maggard. I thank Sergeant Wissinger also for inviting me to speak at this celebration of Veterans Day. It really is good to see everyone here, and it's so wonderful to see the high school kids and the middle school kids. I'm so proud of you all. It's so nice that every year we have such a great assembly because you all are willing to let that happen. I appreciate that so much, and everybody else, the board members, teachers, and veterans, the mother-in-law's here. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be able to speak to you today. The problem with that is, I don't deserve the honor of being up here. I really don't. I've never been in the military. I've never had to suffer in war. I've never had to leave the family that I love for long periods of time. Do you all realize that in some of these deployments that some of our veterans have done to Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere, I assume some of these deployments have been 15 months. And some of these men and women have done more than one deployment. You do 2 deployments, 15 months apiece. That's more than 2 years of your life. These people have sacrificed major parts of their life and their relationships with their families and their friends. We really, really need to understand that about these people that we're looking at. What have I been able to do in life? Well, I remember when I was a little boy and I started playing football. I thought that was the best thing in the world. I was 8 years old. I was so excited. That guy taught me then to let me do that. I don't know how Chuck Clark did that, but he did. And I would take my little Army men to practice because I have to play Army. And the guys, they kind of give me a hard time because I've been playing with my Army men. And you know what? When you grow up, you stop playing Army. Well, I didn't stop. I kept going. And I have a wonderful wife who kind of tolerates that. That's really nice of her. And sometimes I ask myself, what in the world are you doing that for? How dare you? You've never been there. You don't understand. Why are you having a good time with that? Well, one thing that comes to mind, people, is I do it because veterans made it safe for me to do that. And I'm happy to do that. And I love talking to these veterans about things. So, what I get to do is the result of sacrifice of others. And I want to recognize the sacrifice of our veterans. Of course, we all make sacrifices, okay? But today is the Veterans Day. Now, I was born in 1960. I grew up with a lot of World War II veterans. My father was a World War II veteran. And I remember I'd go to church and I'd hear the men talking who had been veterans. And they would be talking about World War II. And also, there were people there that were Korean veterans. They talked about Korea. There were Vietnam veterans. And I grew up listening to all these stories. Wonderfully fond memories. And the sacrifices that they did and the ability for me to have a great life is just all these memories come back. The thing is, I remember how it came back sometimes. For instance, my mother's brother Thurman, the large flag, pick it up for all to see. Everybody look at this flag here. That's my Uncle Thurman's flag that they gave to his mother when he died in 1963. Uncle Thurman was in World War II, and he survived the war, but when Uncle Thurman came back, he didn't know who people were. Now they call it PTSD. Back then they called it being shell-shocked. And he came, and he didn't know anybody, and for the rest of his life until 1963, he just kind of sat there and stared.
And we knew he had been through a lot of rough stuff, but it was almost by accident, they set it down now, thank you. It was almost by accident that I found out what really happened to this guy for him to have these emotional rather than physical scars. He was in Italy in World War II, and he was a part of a regiment, and a regiment, I think, a little over 1,000 men. And he was ordered across the river. To cross the river, that whole regiment was ordered to cross that river and attack the Germans in January or early February. It was cold like today, except maybe 10 degrees colder. And they had to cross this little river. It was called the Rapido River. And it was a fast-flowing river. There was ice in it. They said, cross that river in these little boats. And they crossed the river because they were good men. They were getting shot at. They crossed that river. More than 1,000 men, they got to the other side, and then the Germans really opened up on them. It was a trap. Our general had sent them across the river into a trap, and nobody was able to go help them. People would try to go help them, they just get shot up. And you could hear the gunfire going on where the Germans were fighting the Americans back, and finally, over a period of about a day or so, the American fire dwindled as they ran out of ammunition. More than 1,000 men. There were only 40 men that made it back across that little river, Rapido, in Italy. 40 men. They had to swim back across that river at night to survive. My Uncle Thurman was one of them. 40 men out of more than 1,000. The rest were captured, killed, or wounded. That was a massacre. That was the sacrifice my uncle did. He did several other things after that. But when he came back, my aunt and uncle picked him up in Baltimore. Didn't even know who they were. What a great man. And when I was a little boy, one of the things he did do, he would help my mother with me when I was a little baby. Isn't that neat? Never knew the man, but he helped me. And he helped my mother. I also have an Uncle George Smith. Take the helmet. How many kids saw the LST ship at Ashland last year? Raise your hands, guys. Should be several of you over here, too. The big ship at Ashland, the military ship. Got an LST, landing ship tank. Put your hands down. My Uncle George Smith worked in the engineer room of an LST, once again in the Mediterranean, the Italian theater, the Mediterranean theater in World War II. And he was just a sailor. Well, one day, he got off the ship, and he happened to be in a city in northern France called Toulon. And in Toulon, he was walking down the street, and there was still some German resistance in the town. It hadn't been quite cleared up yet. He's walking down the street. All of a sudden, a Frenchman comes running out of his house, hugs my uncle, starts kissing him, and just trying to tell him how much he appreciated being freed by the Americans. We saved those people from the Nazis, okay? And he motioned for my Uncle George to stay there for a few minutes. He ran back in the house, and apparently in the second floor of the house, there was a dead German. That's his helmet. That Frenchman brought that helmet back to my uncle and gave it to him because he appreciated that so much. And my uncle, before he died a few years ago, he gave me that helmet. Put it down now, thanks. Uncle George survived to teach me a lot of things. He taught me how to rough wire houses. He taught me about remodeling houses. He taught me about mowing the lawn the right way. Never forget that guy. There's some people here that remember it too. Matter of fact, he finally got his high school diploma here in Russell about 10 or 12 years ago. He went to the Navy when he was 15. My goodness. Now, my mother, Ruby Martha Amos Lynn, she wasn't a veteran, but I want to talk to you about her because she sacrificed a whole lot too. Her first husband, Junior Chapman, was killed in the Pacific near the end of World War II. I'll tell you what happened to Junior Chapman. Junior Chapman was on a bomber over Japan. He was shot down. He didn't die. He was shot down. Let's see who's here. That's okay, so. He was shot down, and he was captured for about a month or so, and then he was executed by the Japanese. Okay, that's war. War's tough. Okay? But all I can tell about that man, he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful husband to my mother. They had a child together. My brother Gary, who can't be here today. But I want to tell you what, he's a wonderful man. He took care of my mother when she was alive. He's taking care of the rest of us kids. He's a good man. And Junior Chapman really left behind a wonderful, wonderful legacy. So, my mother lost her first husband. Okay, what about her second husband? Well, that was my dad. Okay, my dad didn't fight in World War II. He was in the rear and he did the warehouse stuff and all that kind of thing. He was in Antwerp, Belgium during the winter of '44. And they were being bombed by German rockets. And a bomb, one of those rockets hit nearby, knocked the big machine over on his head. He got a really bad concussion. They brought him back home. He had headaches there for the rest of his life, right there in that spot. Was it the left side? Doesn't matter. Anyway, 1981, he developed a tumor in that same place. In that very same place. So there's a guy, no, didn't get a Purple Heart, but my goodness, I think he sacrificed too. And what a good dad he was. He always had a flag flying in the yard. He called it Old Glory. Now, what in the world he called it Old Glory for? It's just a flag. But I don't know why. It meant so much to him. There's also another good friend of mine. He's not here today. His name's Larry Cordell. He was in Vietnam. Okay? Vietnam, he was in the 7th Cavalry, you know, Custer's Last Stand and all that. There's still a 7th Cavalry. He was in Vietnam. He sacrificed a whole lot. He helped me to understand a lot about why Uncle Thurman came back and just didn't say very much. It's because sometimes you just don't want to talk about that stuff. You'd rather talk about what went on here. I wish Larry were here today. He's not, but that's okay. He had other things to do. So, I've kind of covered World War II. I've covered Vietnam. Let's go back to Korea. There's a guy that I have to mention. His name's Skip Thompson. Skip, would you stand? Skip's one of the best men I've ever known. I grew up with his sons, and he was in Korea. A lot of people call it the forgotten war because people remember Vietnam and remember World War II, but they kind of didn't remember Korea. I'm going to tell you what, Skip, I remember because there was a lot of sacrifice there too. A lot of people don't know that was a very bloody war for American soldiers. You just don't think about that. It was a very bloody war. And I'm going to tell you what, this veteran right here, I owe so much to him for protecting my freedom. He spent many lonely nights, cold Air Force Base, guarding those airplanes. Thank you, Skip. Thank you, I appreciate it. Now I want to talk about the veterans of these wars we've had in the last 10, 14, 20 years. Some of them are my former students. They're veterans of the Iraq-Afghanistan era. They've seen action not only in those two countries, but in other parts of the world. They too have learned the need of sacrifice. I've learned the deepest respect for them, and at least one of them has died while in the service. A small flag, hold it up, please. Former student gave me that flag. That flag flew over a base in Afghanistan. It flew in the face of the enemy, and I'm proud to show it to you, and he'd be proud for me to show it to you today. And I think we need to be especially mindful of these veterans that have come back in the last so many years from these foreign wars. We need to love them and care for them, and because they've been through a lot, these long deployments, like I said, they did that. They sacrificed for our freedoms, for our liberty. Now, there's a lot of people like to talk about the young people of today, our teenagers, and about how they've forgotten about patriotism, how they've forgotten about the sacrifices of the past. Well, you know what? To an extent, I guess that's true, but in my experience, a lot of our students really understand about these people, and they appreciate our veterans. For instance, Notice the bottle of sand, you might not be able to see it. That's a bottle of sand. That's from Omaha Beach. D-Day, 1944, June 6, 1944. A former student of mine. A former student gave that to me, about 6 or 7 years ago. His family went to France, and he brought me back that bottle of sand. I told somebody earlier, the kids were helping me break that down. That's the most valuable thing on the table just about to me. That bottle of sand, there's so much sacrifice there, because our men died getting that little piece of beef. Now, what does this say to you, bears? This tells you, young people haven't forgotten. They understand. Okay? It's our job to keep them remembering. But they do understand, and they do remember. The young still care. Okay, past, present. What about the future? We're still going to have to make sacrifices. That's the way it is, and I don't see any other way around it. There's going to be men and women willing and dedicated enough to defend our liberties and our future. Some of you people right now are going to be involved in that. Think about that. Defending our liberties. Benjamin Franklin spoke about liberty. Here's one thing that he said. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. In the future, when we're defending our liberties, let this be a warning. Let's make sure to protect these liberties, at the same time securing our safety. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Led. At this time, I'd like to share some numbers with you about the veterans you see sitting in front of you. The average service of the veterans you see on the floor is 10 years. I'm going to give you some total numbers, but before I do, we range in anything from 1 year served to 30 years served. And I would like to start off with the one that served the most, Colonel Binky, United States Army. Would you please stand? This next gentleman, I'd like to have him stand. He served 1 year. And you may wonder, why am I asking somebody who served 1 year to stand up after somebody who served 30? Dr. French, could you please stand? Dr. French was a corporal. The reason I'm having him stand, if you could see the hat that he's wearing, it's a Purple Heart hat. Dr. French was in the military for 1 year. He was wounded in combat. If you shot me in my right big toe, that's going to be too close to my heart. In order to get a Purple Heart, you have to be in combat, being shot at or blown up. So how about a hand for Dr. French? And as Dr. French always, the way he is, he's always a gentleman. He asked me to check. Are there any other Purple Heart recipients? Please stand up. Purple Heart recipients. Okay? I've got a couple of numbers to share with you, and then we'll get on with the program. Ladies and gentlemen, the veterans you see on the floor, I'm going to ask you to stand if you served in the United States Army. The United States Army, please stand. The veterans you see standing before you have 146 years of service to our country. Thank you. If you served in the United States Navy, please stand. The United States Navy. 33 years of service to our country. Thank you. If you served in the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, please stand. There you go. 38 years of service. Thank you. If you served in the United States Air Force, United States Air Force. You see before you 135 years of service. Now, I'd like to ask all veterans to please stand. All veterans. Ladies and gentlemen, you see 38 veterans serving a total of 362 years of service protecting our freedom. How about a hand? I have one more introduction, then I'll turn it over to Master Sergeant Wissinger. If you served in the Iraq or Afghanistan area of theater of operations, please stand up. Stand up. Iraq or Afghanistan? If you served during the Cold War, please stand up. During the Cold War. You'll notice that some veterans are standing more than once. If you served during the Vietnam War, please stand. If you served during the Korean War, please stand. This next group of veterans, Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. If it wasn't for these individuals, I could be speaking German or Japanese to you right now. Would veterans of World War II please stand? World War II. Let me tell you how sharp these World War II veterans are. During Mr. Lynn's speech, one of them handed me a note, passed it down the aisle, saying, "Please have everybody stand by the wars," which was already in my script. This gentleman over here proudly says there are 640 World War II veterans dying each day. So how about another hand for these World War II veterans? Ladies and gentlemen, while we are honored to have so many of you present today, we would be remiss if we did not pause to remember those who could not be with us.
As you enter the gymnasium, you may have noticed a round table set for one, place of honor. symbolizing both the price of freedom and the frailty of one prisoner alone against his oppressions. This table is filled with symbolism. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their motives when answering the call of duty. This table is our way of symbolizing the fact that members of our profession of arms are missing from our midst. They are commonly called fallen comrades. Some are called POW or MIA. We call them brothers and sisters. They are unable to be with us today, and so we remember them because of their sacrifice and incarceration. The War of Independence was fought from 1776 to 1782 by a volunteer force assembled from the original 13 colonies. These brave soldiers brought us our independence from Great Britain. This rifle represents the one recovered from the hands of the first to die for our freedom in a field near Concord, Massachusetts, following the first armed conflict between the militia and British troops. Thousands never came home. World Wars I and II were the most devastating in human history. Millions of lives were lost in defense of the world's freedom. This chair represents the thousands of spouses, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, and grandfathers who waited at home for over 292,000 Americans who would never return. Communism from the North brought war to the Korean Peninsula in 1950. The United States lost 23,300 to gain a peace agreement or armistice in July of 1953. This rose represents the hopes and dreams of peace for each soldier who made the ultimate sacrifice for the people of South Korea. 57,685 casualties came with the ceasefire following 10 long years of direct U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. A slice of lemon on the bread plate is to remind us of the bitter fate of those captured and missing in a foreign land. A pinch of salt symbolizes the tears endured by those missing and their families who seek answers. The Bible represents the strength gained through faith to sustain those lost from our country, founded as one nation under God. This wine glass, placed upside down, represents their inability to share a toast and all of life's hopes and dreams never realized by those who were lost. This yellow ribbon represents the hopes and prayers of the thousands of families and friends who waited for the safe return of their loved ones from Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm of over 500,000 U.S. service personnel. The hopes and prayers for 246 went unanswered. During the ongoing operations, Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, our brothers and sisters continued to make the ultimate sacrifice while securing freedom for U.S. and our allies. The lighting of this candle serves to remind us of the ultimate sacrifice our fallen comrades and their families have made to preserve the precious freedom we all cherish today. As a small tribute, I ask that we take a moment of silence as an expression of our gratitude to those who sacrificed for us. Please stand for the playing of taps by Cadets Isaac Stevens and Jason Blevins as we remember our fallen veterans who paid a supreme price.
Please take your seats. I would like to thank Superintendent Horn, Principals Chafin, and Moore for allowing us to put on this Veterans Day ceremony today. Thank you, Mr. Lynn, for sharing your personal stories. Thank you, high school and middle school students, for the attention and respect you've shown the veterans today. You always make us proud. Thank you, veterans, for taking your time out of your schedule to come and attend today's ceremony. But most of all, thank you, veterans, for your service to our country. How about another hand for our veterans? Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's service. I'm going to turn it over to the principals to dismiss the students.